Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey, health junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm interviewing Brad Pitzele. He is the owner of 1,000 Roads Exercise with Oxygen Therapy. WOT is how it is referred to. Now, he and I talk about some really cool stuff in terms of the transformation of health that you can have when you use oxygen with exercise. Now, I'm not talking just athletes using this. I'm talking about folks who struggle to move and get movement in because of either trouble breathing or just feeling worn out quickly with movement, or really struggling with the recovery after the movement. And so Brad's got a really great story here. We're going to dive into it, but he's had a lifetime of strange medical conditions and was diagnosed with an autoimmune type of arthritis in 2010, malignant melanoma in 2014, and eventually Lyme disease. Now, while this might sound strange that someone has multiple different types of diagnoses, I see it all the time when someone is really chronically ill. And on his healing journey, he tried a ton of things. He said it was like his boneyard of different things that he had tried. But what he found was that the oxygen with exercise therapy really worked for him. And so, of course, he decided he had to share this with everyone. And he has a background in mechanical engineering. And so he took that background, paired it with what was going on with him and the power of exercise with oxygen therapy. And here we are today. 1,000 Roads has been providing affordable, high quality exercise with oxygen therapy EWOT system since 2018. And so Brad and I are going to dive into all of this. We're going to talk about his products, and we're going to dive into a little bit of how he's pairing it with red light therapy to get optimal results. So let's introduce you to Brad Pitzele. Brad Pitzele, welcome to the Health Fix podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, since I saw the info on EWOT, I was like, yes, we're thinking about that for the clinic. My husband and I used to play with it, as I told you a little bit, in terms of our very generic ways of doing it when he worked for an oxygen company in Colorado. And so it all comes full circle, right? At the end of the day, it's all the subliminal messages that maybe I need some more oxygen in my world. So, of course, a lot of folks are going to be like, how do you come to deciding that you want to work with supplemental oxygen in your world? And you've got quite a story. So let's start off with how you came to vibrant owner of a business and not so feeling so great not too awful long ago.
Yeah, it didn't start out so great for me. I always had I had small autoimmune conditions and like strange health things that would kind of pop in and out of my life from early childhood, but they never were really significant enough or stuck around long enough. We might go to the doctor and they'd give it a name, but there was nothing to do and it just kind of went away. But things kind of took a turn for the worse. In maybe 2011, I want to say, my autoimmunity developed into autoimmune arthritis. And things, I started getting in my hands and it was kind of bad. I went to a rheumatologist and they put me on the typical meds. Eventually, when they got to the powerful meds, they started to help. But they would only help for like 6 months and they'd wear off, and then they'd double the dose and it'd work another 6 months, and then it was on to the next drug. And I was on that treadmill of pharmaceuticals until I developed melanoma. And one of the side effects of these drugs is it causes a higher risk of cancer, and particularly melanoma is one of them. And so I went to my rheumatologist and said, hey, what do I do here? I feel like if I don't take the drugs, I'm going to die of this painful autoimmune condition. If I do take them, I'm going to end up with cancer and die. And, obviously neither one of those is particularly appetizing. So is there another way? And he kind of was like, we'll just try another drug in the same class and it probably will react different with you. And it was a great uneasy feeling to walk out of that doctor's appointment and just know like you felt like you're being fed to the sharks. And I was like, I guess I got to find my own third way. I don't know what it is. And like a lot of folks, I Googled around. I did all sorts of research, read through PubMed research, tried everything. I tried diets, elimination diets. I tried supplements. I tried all sorts of wellness technologies, and nothing was working. until I eventually ended up at a naturopathic doctor, and he recommended I try EWOT, exercise with oxygen therapy. And probably like most of your listeners, I'd never heard of this thing. And so I went home and I started to research it. And I didn't really have a lot of faith in the companies that were selling it at the time. There was a lot of marketing hyperbole. It didn't come off as authentic. And, I tried everything and nothing worked. So why was I going to go spend, at the time, it was $5,000 to $25,000 on an experiment? It would just be another bone in the boneyard is kind of how I felt. And
exercise with oxygen therapy, EWOT.
So I started to look into it. I didn't have a lot of faith in what I saw in the marketplace, and certainly not enough to invest that kind of money. And I decided to make my own. And I did start to get better. About a year later, I went back to that doctor, and he was surprised at how much better I was doing. And he asked me if I was doing EWOT, and I said yes. And he said, "Who'd you buy it from?" So I could tell my other patients, where to go. And I said, "I made my own." And he said, he was kind of shocked. And then he's like, "Would you consider making them for my patients?" And so that was the birth of 1,000 Roads. We wanted to do something to kind of pay it forward. It was a very lonely and dark place when you feel like your life force, if you will, kind of starting to dim. And there was just everyone coming at me with $20,000 and $50,000 solutions. And I just felt like no one knew about this technology. And if we could bring down the price and democratize it, so many more people could benefit from it, because it's really tremendous. And I continued to get better, and I continued to try different things. It took me a little while to get to my full health. Eventually, I worked my way into trying something that's now become more well-known, red light therapy. And I did a lot of research on that, and actually red and near-infrared light therapy kind of work on the same sort of oxygen principles, and they kind of work at it from two different sides. And so when I started to add that too, I saw an acceleration in my healing and returning to wellness. And so it was kind of an exciting journey. Here I am years later. At the time, if you knew where I was, I had this foot pain so severe from a Lyme disease co-infection called Bartonella that I could barely walk. I had severe brain fog, like neurological issues, arthritis. All my muscles were stiff. I had like 60 or 70 different symptoms that were just like someone would come in and take over and then they'd go away sort of thing. But I was dealing with all of them, and I was just like faking it to make it through the day. You know what I mean? And hoping nobody at work noticed, and really didn't feel like I was fully there at the time for my family, because I was just so low energy and brain foggy and in so much pain and discomfort. So sometimes today I look back and I'm just kind of shocked how far I've come. So it's pretty awesome.
You give hope to a lot of folks who are listening to this, who are in a space maybe just similar to where you were, maybe somewhere a little less than that. Because one of the things you mentioned that I hear often from folks that have chronic illness is that they hear these really expensive, types of things like, hey, we can help you with this and we can change your life. And you almost get addicted to being like, let me try the next thing. Let me try the next thing. And it sounds like you kind of went through that whole pathway of, this is the thing that's going to work. This is the thing.
Yeah. I tried so many things. My family has reminded me from time to time of some of the weird and crazy things I've tried. Some of them I've just completely blanked out on, probably a survival mechanism or something. But yes, I do. And you're so hopeful, but then you also are girded with your hope because you don't want to get too hopeful because everything else has kind of let you down. And so it's a little bit of a roller coaster.
It is. And I see that with a lot of my clients. And one of the big things that brought me to looking at EWOT too is, a lot of people struggle with circulation and what comes with circulation, right? Oxygen. The other big thing is a lot of people struggle with exercise just to be able to move in general. And if your feet hurt, I can't imagine, someone's like, well, you could go swimming instead. And then now we have swimming has other issues, and I'm sure you've heard all the different things. We'll just try this instead, or just try that instead.
Yeah.
Now you have an engineering background. Is that what I saw? Is that correct?
That's right,
Okay.
mechanical engineering.
Okay. And so bring us back to like your mind thinking about oxygen and creating something and thinking about it with exercise, and just kind of bring us into the space you were in and kind of how things came together. Because I think a lot of people, especially folks who aren't really exercise minded, wouldn't think about like, well, why with exercise?
It's a great question. And, I was always very research minded, to be honest. I spent a lot of time on PubMed reading everything I could about the label they gave to my, did a bunch of reading on like even social media and groups of folks who had similar issues. I just wanted all the information and try to figure it out. That's where I learned things people were trying and what was working or not working from. And it was a lot, but then also I wanted to know the science, because some of the stuff comes off awfully woohoo, and while you desperately want to believe the woohoo, anything to get me out of this trap, I also wanted some comfort in knowing that I wasn't just wasting my time on hope without any kind of science behind it. So the science is really fascinating about oxygen. Oxygen does several great things for our body. First off, you don't hear very much in the medical community, but a truth is every year past the age of 25, your body loses 1% of its ability to utilize oxygen. And that doesn't mean anything at 27 necessarily. But, all of a sudden you get to 50 and you've lost 25% of your body's ability to utilize oxygen. Well, oxygen is fundamental for our fuel. If you take a cell and you force it to produce energy without oxygen, it can only produce about 5% of the energy it can produce with oxygen. So it's in bare survival mode. It's like not even doing all the essential functions. It's just barely hanging on. And so as we all age, this naturally happens to us. And so some of the first research I read was the gentleman who discovered EWOT. He was doing really prolific inventor, Manfred von Arding in the 1960s and 70s. Now, this is the guy who invented like the scanning electron microscope. He helped commercialize CRT television sets in the 90s. And then another Nobel Prize winner, Otto Warburg, discovered that oxygen is essential, and that if you take a cell and deprive it of oxygen, you can turn a healthy cell into a cancer cell. And so he won a Nobel Prize for that. And so von Arding started to do research around oxygen, and he's kind of the godfather of EWOT. What he found was not only could he turn a cancer cell non-cancerous through doing EWOT, but he also discovered that as we age, we have this inflammaging that we now call it, this natural, supposedly, inflammation that builds up in our body, including in our circulatory system. So the ends of your circulatory system, you have capillaries that are thinner than a human hair. When they have inflammation in the lining of them, they swell shut, and your red blood cells can't get through. And so this is the cause of that 1% loss of oxygen utilization. There's no oxygen passing this blockage, if you will. And all the cells that depend on that capillary to feed them, they've now gone into this anaerobic survival mode where they've only got 5% of their energy. And so this is part of the reason why as we get older, we have memory challenges. We don't have the same feel as energetic as we used to. We start to feel aches and pains a lot more. A lot of this has to do with the oxygen status in our cells. And what he found was that when you do EWOT, oxygen is incredibly anti-inflammatory. And actually the science is really clear on this. Anywhere in your body, you have low oxygen, you have inflammation. And anywhere you have inflammation, you have low oxygen. They're just two sides of the same coin, which was a really exciting discovery for me at the time, Jannine. It was like, well, that's pretty intense, right? Like at the root of inflammation is low oxygen. And so that was one of the things I bought into. But then what von Arding discovered is when he gave people EWOT, he caused this anti-inflammatory effect in their capillaries that allowed the red blood cells to flow through again. And he took some elderly folks and he had them do EWOT just 2 or 3 times, and they came back many weeks later and they still had normal blood flow. So it wasn't just while they were doing EWOT, it was continuing on, right? And so that was a light bulb moment for me, because I knew I was having circulation challenges as part of my many symptomologies. And obviously I knew inflammation was at the root of my arthritis, my neuropathic pains, and my stiff muscles. And what wasn't inflammation was probably lactic acid. So, and by the way, you know how your body gets rid of lactic acid is it uses oxygen to break it down into fuel, believe it or not. So it was just, as I started to get deeper and deeper into the physiology of us as humans, it was like, well, geez, yeah, if I have less oxygen and it's causing more inflammation, like none of this is good for me. And I kind of came to the conclusion early on when I started to buy in, I was like, well, you know what? What's the worst thing that could happen if I tried it? I guess I get too much oxygen. It's like, you know, like there wasn't a major downside to it, right? It was just oxygen. We weren't talking pharmaceuticals or anything like that. The root of your chronic illness is inflammation. And at the root of your inflammation is low oxygen. So if you can find a way to obviously turn that teeter-totter back to a more balanced oxygenation state, you're already going to put yourself in a better situation where all of the systems in your body can help, you know, do what they're designed to do, which is to repair and bring you back to homeostasis.
Chinese medicine talks all about circulation. That's what like qi and blood flow is.
Yep.
And so like they knew back 5,000 years ago how important oxygen was. And so, you know, you've now just opened up another way for folks to enhance it because we do so many things that decrease our oxygen levels.
Yes.
You know, like you're saying, you need oxygen to decrease lactic, but we also like sit around and do nothing all day. And we, you know, and we eat poor foods that, you know, suck up our oxygen and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've done the research on all the things that deplete our oxygen in our body.
Yeah, you know, and here's the other, like, as you're talking about, like, eating terrible things, and if you think about the environment and all the toxins we take in every day, you know, detoxification is so important. And when I was really battling Lyme disease, you know, there was kind of 3 different areas I was trying to get better in, if I were, like, maybe 4. One was probably just general energy, give me energy to, like, just try to be myself. 2 was like inflammation, get rid of all this pain and all this sort of stuff. 3 was help me kill this bacteria and like get my immune system on top of it versus underneath it, sort of thing. And the 4th one is actually one of the largest ones that we would talk about a lot in the Lyme community, which is detoxification. Now, I always say, like, people with Lyme disease are kind of the canary in the coal mine. Like, the things that they're trying to do are things like pretty much all of us could benefit from in society, but because you've got this bacteria basically taking you down several notches, it's more apparent. And that was kind of the cool thing is to realize that there's a couple of really interesting tidbits that also got me onto oxygen with detoxification, which number 1, about 70% of all the toxins you remove from your body actually come through your lungs, which nobody really talks about, that one. And the second one is, even when we're using traditional detoxification pathways, oxygen itself is critical because oxygen is used as a chemical reaction called an oxidation reaction, which breaks down these chemicals into smaller bits and components that our elimination organs can remove. And so it'll, you know, it'll help with your kidneys and your liver and every other elimination organ in your body, helping sift through this stuff and get it out more quickly. So whether it's lactic acid or toxins, oxygen is like at the root of it again. And then the interesting thing is just the synergy between the two. So obviously another one of our detoxification modalities is through our lymphatic system, right? Your lymphatic system does not have a pump like your circulatory system. There is no heart for the lymphatic system. So the way we get our lymphatic system pumping is through movement generally. And so that's the exercise component, and getting your lymphatic system moving while you're enriched with oxygen, obviously it's just a multiplier effect there.
You hit on so many points that I think about and we talk about, you know, in our clinic with our different patients, because the lymph, like everything's stuck in the lymph. I feel like, especially with Lyme, so many folks are stuck there.
Yeah.
And also, like, you know, back to where I was before, like, you don't want to work out. You don't feel good. You don't want to move. And so, you know, people are talking about, well, you can enhance your oxygenation by sprint training. Like, I can't even walk across, you know, the living room without hurting. You want me to sprint? Like, are you kidding me right now?
Well, and that's a good thing to tell your listeners is, like, this doesn't have to be super intense exercise. And And the interesting thing is, again, I talk about these synergies. If you put the mask on, so the way you do EWA is you're breathing it through a mask while you're doing, let's say, cardio generally. You put that mask on and you're breathing 93% oxygen. And that's compared to the 21% you're breathing at sea level. So it's a massive increase. And immediately the exercise gets easier. Like, I'll give you an example of me is I started exercising and I was on an elliptical machine, and it was at a resistance of 12. And, that was fine, and I'd done that before I had gotten sick. And then I put the mask on, and immediately I was like, I wasn't getting a workout at 12. I had to go up to 14. And then over time it was 15 and 16. And today I do it at like a 17 out of 20, which is kind of a crazy high level for this elliptical machine. But I don't feel like I'm working any more than I did back in the day. I probably could read a magazine if I wanted to while I was doing it. But it immediately makes it easier, and it quickly improves your athletic ability, where you're just like, okay, I'm not getting anything out of this. I need to do a little bit more, and you naturally increase your intensity. It does make exercise more tolerable, and an EWAT session is only 15 minutes. So if you think of a normal cardio session, most folks are probably doing 30 or more minutes. And so for me, it actually became a time savings versus anything else. I was like, I can find a way to make it work for 15 minutes. And we have folks who come to us from all levels of health. We have elite athletes who are using this to improve their performance, but we have sick, 86-year-old people using it. I actually had a lady call me yesterday and said, she'd bought our system a couple of years ago, and we were having a conversation. She wanted to buy some air filters, and she was telling me at the time they wanted to do knee surgery on her, and she was adamant about not getting knee surgery, and she thought she was going to be in a wheelchair, and she credits this with allowing her to walk and having her pain-free mobility back. It's something you can start wherever you are and kind of make your way up the intensity chain as it permits.
So, of course, just to give people a picture of it, like let's go to like the most deconditioned, someone who's in a lot of pain. I always think about like some of my folks, like a little bit of chair movement. They're sitting, and maybe they're just, maybe just to give folks who are listening versus the video on YouTube, the little bike, tiny little pedaler things, right?
I recommend those all the time. The pedal bike you can do on a chair is a great place for people to start.
Okay.
We have folks who start on those pedal bikes. They're $49 on Amazon, right? We have folks who start by bouncing on a rebounder, which is also great for lymphatic flow, as you know. We have folks who start walking or marching in place, slow walking on a treadmill. Some will even just start doing stretches or maybe a little bit of weight training sort of thing, or some calisthenics. The idea is simply to get your heart rate up while you're breathing this oxygen, and this goes back to like the synergies. So when you start exercising, your body immediately recognizes that it's going to go into an oxygen deficit, and it won't be able to continue the exercise. So in all the infinite wisdom of our body, it has all these physiological changes. You start breathing deeper and faster. The membrane between your lungs and your blood, your circulatory system thins out. Your heart beats faster and deeper, and your blood vessels dilate, which allows more blood to flow through. And so we basically just hijack all of these physiological changes to bring more oxygen into the tissues at a time when the tissues are really thirsting for it, and they're in the most receptive kind of state, if you will. And so that's why if you do a 15-minute EWAT session, you can bring in as much oxygen as you would in a normal day in like 12 or 14 hours. So it's a massive amount of oxygen in a really short period of time. And it's something that's actually accessible to people regardless of fitness level.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think a lot of people are thinking, well, maybe they do work out, right? Maybe they're like me. They'll do some weights, they'll do some sprints, some things of that nature, and going like, oh, could this benefit me? And what you were saying, like you've got elite athletes who are doing this to work on their oxygenation. Do you guys track like HRV with this on some folks to see like, how is it working with heart rate variability and improvements in that level?
We don't have any data on HRV. We do on things like VO2 max. There's a lot of research on VO2 max increasing, which is for your listeners, that's the volume of oxygen you can intake. And basically it's a score of fitness, very hard very hard metric to actually change, without a lot of training. But, we see that. We see really the things that matter more to me. I told you I spent a lot of time on science, but really the things that matter more to me is hearing the stories from folks who are doing it. Some of them you can see on some of the reviews in our site, people talking about how it got rid of 90% of their chemotherapy side effects, or they felt it helped them avoid doing chemo or radiation, talking about their aches or pains or brain fog or whatever it was going away. Here's the truth of the matter. At the root of every chronic illness, so any listener you have who's dealing with chronic illness, the root of your chronic illness is inflammation. And at the root of your inflammation is low oxygen. So if you can find a way to obviously turn that teeter-totter back to a more balanced oxygenation state, you're already going to put yourself in a better situation where all of the systems in your body can help, do what they're designed to do, which is to repair and bring you back to homeostasis.
Well said, well said. I mean, inflammation, and I'm going to sound like a broken record back to the Chinese. I mean, it was like once you have stagnation of blood, which is not getting nutrients and oxygen to the tissue can die and it won't work optimally. And this is going to be your source, right, of inflammation. Now, devil's advocate, some folks might be like, well, Brad, how does the body know where to take the oxygen? Is it gonna go right to, let's say my lungs are chronically inflamed? Oh, okay, that's easy enough because we're breathing, but what about if it's like my pancreas?
Yeah, well, your circulatory system is what happens. So one of the other cool things that happens in exercise that I don't talk about too much is your systolic blood pressure goes up. That makes people nervous. Like, wait, that's bad, high blood pressure. Well, high blood pressure at rest is bad, but high blood pressure during exercise is natural and it's a good thing. And the pressure difference between your circulatory system and the cells adjacent to it that need oxygen is actually the force that's driving oxygen in. So everywhere in your circulatory system is experiencing higher pressure, which means the oxygen can get further into the tissues. And so we see benefits in folks from everything. We've got folks doing this to help themselves with Alzheimer's or early onset dementia, CTE, and stroke, concussions, Parkinson's, Lyme, long COVID, autoimmunity, cancer. I mean, because at the root of it, all of these are dealing with the same thing. And when we say cancer, it's all sorts of different. There is pancreatic cancer. I've got a very wealthy gentleman locally I know who's using it to help treat his pancreatic cancer. And he was given just, weeks to live sort of thing. And here he is, 18 months later, feeling better than ever sort of thing. And his wife, unfortunately, developed colon cancer. And so he had his EWAT system at his place of business. And they came back and bought a second system for the home for her. And they're both doing great. So, I mean, I just, every day I hear these stories of folks, like real stories, right? Because it's great when you read it on the science, but to me, that's what's so meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that, the pressure differential and the gradients, because I think a lot of people, maybe we had them in biology in high school and we've since forgot it then, but it's one of the things that I'm often asked. Now, of course, I asked you before we hit record because there is, talk about how one would integrate oxygen deprivation on top of oxygen supplementation. And what this whole principle that you just mentioned right now makes sense, that if we deprive the body of oxygen, of course we would have more inflammation.
That's right.
And so I'm going to let you take over from what you had said to me, because a lot of people will think, well, what about, oxygen deprivation then? Could we intermittently do one and then the other and drive things faster?
Yeah, so there's a school of thought around that you can do that. And the challenge is with most folks, I don't recommend it. Now, I would say if you have listeners out there and they're elite athletes and they're looking to hit a new PR sort of thing, I think oxygen deprivation could give you, the last 1 or 2%. You just have to be careful because obviously increased inflammation can also lead to increased risk of injury. So you just have to be smart about that. For most folks, people with chronic health conditions, they can't deal with and that's the feedback I get from our customers who've tried it, is it really sets them back, the extra inflammation. And even people who are doing EWAT for general wellness or anti-aging benefits, most of them will not benefit from it. you could, and I do tell folks, you could do it with our system if you wanted to. You basically do a minute of cardio and for about 5 or 7 seconds, you just hold your breath. Now, the school of thought on why people do this oxygen deprivation is it creates this hormetic effect. In effect, what happens is exercise creates a hormetic effect, right? And so when you're exercising, you are going into some natural oxygen deprivation. And so your body has all those compensatory changes we talked about, including vasodilation. So if you dial down your oxygen consumption more, theoretically, you're going to generate even more vasodilation and potentially be able to bring more oxygen into certain tissues. The challenge becomes that inflammation, and a lot of that oxygen needs to go to fight off the inflammation you created by depriving the body. And, obviously, anyone who spent any time underwater knows our body would prefer to have a steady stream of oxygen versus being deprived and then replenished, sort of thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I can see in the elite space, but for every, single one of us, that are just trying to get by, or who have chronic pain and pain in particular, I couldn't imagine.
That's right.
And like my Chinese medicine principles would be like, that's not a good idea. It's kind of like putting too much ice on somebody, which is a whole nother podcast of talking about cold plunges. But that's a whole different story. It's triggering different things. But when it comes to like, you had said 15 minutes, that's the amount of time, more or less. Do you recommend it every day? Should you take a break? Like, what's kind of the interval that you find to be best for if we go off like Lyme or chronic pain? Let's go in that realm.
Yeah, and it's really the same kind of protocol I recommend for almost everyone. Okay. And that's that you do it, if you can, up to 3 to 5 times a week. You could do it 7 times a week. The only reason I don't recommend 7 is because you are exercising and your body can use at least a day or 2 of rest. I always tell folks, but if you're one of these people who exercises 7 days a week, there's no harm in adding oxygen to it. You will get benefits from it. And then we have really sick folks who can't, do 3 times a week, or it's going to take them many months to work up to 3 times a week, and that's okay. They'll still get benefits. I always caution against perfection being the enemy of progress, sort of thing. Like, you just need to put one foot in front of the other when you're that sick. And like, we have folks who are doing it once a week to start out with, and that's fine. And then, in a couple months, they can add a second session, and then it starts to kind of snowball, and they start to be able to do more and more. And it becomes one of those like modalities that, I hear this all the time that, because we've got folks who have they have the cold plunge and they have all the other toys, and they'll come back and tell us this is their favorite because it's such a noticeable difference. Like, they can feel it in a way that a lot of these others, you can't necessarily feel day to day. So it becomes self-motivating at some point where you don't want to not do it.
Absolutely. Cold plunges on a cold day in the middle of Wisconsin in the winter. No,
just go outside.
Right. I'd rather as well go outside and do some snow angels and call it good. It's all about preference, and if definitely if something's going to make me feel better, I'm going to keep wanting to do it. And that's what I find with chronic, unless we look a lot, into supplement protocols with killing Lyme. We do all these different things, but it's like, why not let the body do its own thing? And all of this.
And the thing for me with Lyme, I always used to joke, the hardest part about Lyme was what I called all the ceremonies. You had to count the pills out every night. And then you had to go do this treatment. And then you went and did that thing. And then you keep stuffing more things in to try to get better. And then you find you're spending 7 hours a day. And even if you do feel better, so what? It's like time to go to bed by the time you finished them all. And then you just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that was a thing that really got me on this early on. I was like, wait a second. This will help fight the Lyme. It'll help fight my inflammation. It'll help detoxify me, and it'll improve my energy. It's like, it's 15 minutes. I can definitely find 15 minutes to do this. And yeah, so I think that's one of the most powerful things is it's something that does so many different things for you, and you can do it in your own home. That's a really nice feature for folks because the consistency is what really drives results for people.
For sure. It's one thing having it at an office, and you have to go to it, but if it's at home, so huge. Now, I'm curious, I love red light therapy. It's one of my favorite tools out there. How do you pair it with EWOT? What are you doing? How do you, what's kind of your jam for it?
Yeah, so what most people don't know about red light and near infrared light therapy is they actually work by increasing the demand for oxygen in your mitochondria inside your cells. So those are the little organelles inside your cells that produce energy. And so all the benefits practically of red and near infrared light is due to stimulating the increase of oxygen demand. And so you hear about it, you shine it on your skin, you see more youthful skin, less wrinkles, et cetera, et cetera. You shine it on your brain, it improves memory, it improves bone healing, muscle recovery, all these sorts of things. It's all the same thing, which is increased oxygen demand in the cells. So there is a really specific way you use it, and depending on what you're trying to use it for. If you're an athlete trying to, again, hit your PR, I recommend you do red light right before you exercise on the muscles you're about to exercise, and do like an endurance test or a speed test or whatever you're trying to do, and then do the EWAT while you're doing that, because both of those synergistically will help you be able to kind of hit new peaks on what your output could be. But for most of us who aren't looking to hit those records, I actually recommend you flip the order of that. So you start doing a session of EWAT and you flood your body, massively increasing your oxygen supply. And then immediately when you're done, you get underneath the red light, and then it causes all of your cells to suck up all of that extra oxygen. And it's really a force multiplier.
Nice. Sounds amazing. I'm thinking I need to do some stuff like this. I have a ton of red light. I just don't have the oxygen at this point. All right. Well, I know a guy now. So tell us a little bit about 1000 Roads. Tell us a little bit about all you guys are offering, because I'm seeing red light on there. I'm also seeing different, 2 different main types of EWAT. Give us a little scoop of what you guys got there.
Yeah, that's right. So we have red light therapy and EWAT are the 2 product categories we carry. So EWAT, we offer 2 different systems. So basically you buy an EWAT system, and the only other thing you need is maybe a piece of exercise equipment, whether that be that little pedal bike or a real piece of cardio equipment, and some folks, to be quite honest, like I said, they'll start out doing some kind of exercise in place. But it's basically meant for all kind of like everything you need to get going. I'll tell you, folks, look at them. They look a little intimidating, but usually customers have them set up in 15 minutes. They're made to be super simple, because we know we're dealing with folks with chronic illness and they're brain foggy and low energy. And so the machinery itself is super simple. It's flip a switch sort of thing and off you go. And basically, the way an EWAT system works is you have a device that takes the oxygen in the air at 21% and purifies it to 93%. And we sell 2 systems, one that can produce 5 liters of oxygen every minute and the other that can produce 10 liters of oxygen every minute. Now, the problem is when you're exercising, you could easily use 50 or 60 liters in a minute. And so neither one of them produces enough oxygen. So what we do is we take those devices and we fill this 1,000-liter reservoir filled with oxygen, and you attach the mask to this reservoir. So the device fills the reservoir, and you breathe off the reservoir. And the difference between the 2 systems is just how long it takes to fill that reservoir. So the 5-liter system takes 3 hours to have that reservoir full, and the 10-liter system takes about 90 minutes to have it full. And then away you go, sort of thing. So we probably sell 5 to 1 more of the larger system, because people love the convenience, and if you have multiple people using it, it's a more practical solution. But when we have folks with chronic illness who are on tight budgets, the 5-liter system is a great option. We were probably the first company in the space that even offered that option, because we were trying to make it more affordable for folks who, if you've got a chronic illness, sometimes you don't, it's hard to work, it's hard to earn money, you're spending a lot, not making a lot. And so that was the goal there. And then we currently have our first red light on the website. Perhaps by the time this launches, we'll have 2 others. So we'll have a suite of 3 different red lights. They each offer 8 different wavelengths of red and infrared light. So there's 4 red infrared wavelengths, and for infrared, they're some of the most heavily researched ones. Obviously, I told you I'm very science-backed, so we went back to the science and crawled around on PubMed and anywhere else we could find, and wanted to understand what things were having best benefits for people. And so having a broad spectrum in red and near infrared lights is important, because red lights generally affect more superficial tissues like skin and subskin, and then near infrared will target deeper tissues. You can get deeper into the body, connective tissues, muscles, brain, etc. And so we pair those So we're having a broad impact on various different systems in the body.
Makes sense. It makes sense. And I think for what you're looking at, I mean, it's kind of like, I'm going to be so kitschy on it, but like the 1-2 punch, like literally you're getting things primed and ready to go. And gosh, it's really cool. It's really cool. Now, in terms of masks and things of that nature and being able to apply those, obviously different folks want different masks. I'm guessing, what are some of your secrets there? Because that's the biggest thing I hear from a lot of folks when it comes to the right kind of mask.
Yeah. When I first got into EWOT, there was a mask people were using, and there was challenges with it. And the challenges were it didn't have very good oxygen throughput. So it was fine for folks who were deconditioned, but once you started to get conditioned, which happens fast with EWOT, you kind of felt like you were sucking oxygen through a straw. And so we set out to find a better solution. And, the mask we use today is used by several companies in the space. It's a wonderful mask. It fits the vast majority of folks. It has so many great characteristics to it. And one of the things it has this, there's different sizes, to your point, for people, different size faces. And it has this 5-way adjustable harness that you put on, so you kind of fit it just right to you. And then you can clip in and out of it, and you don't have to mess with that harness again. So we get a really good fit with, just about everyone. I think there's probably been 1 or 2 people I can think of throughout the history of the company where the mask wasn't a good fit for them, sort of things. Really, kudos to the manufacturer on that one, I'll tell you that.
And then, of course, people are going to ask me it, so I'm going to ask it. What about the nasal cannulas? Can it even be done with a nasal cannula?
So our masks, if you go on our site and you look at them, they have what's called this green component on the front, which is a valve. And it's called a 2-way non-rebreather valve. And so what that means is when you breathe in, one valve opens and the hose connected with the oxygen, so near pure oxygen is flowing in. When you breathe out, it forces that valve closed so you're not exhaling back into the reservoir. And the other one opens and you breathe out into the room. So every fresh breath is 93% oxygen. You're not mixing your exhale gases. With a nasal cannula, the flow rate, you would be talking 5 or 10 liters a minute. And because it's in your nose, obviously everything else you're breathing around it would be air and you'd be diluting it. So if we go back to Manfred von Ardeen, what he did, a lot of research on the different percentages of oxygen and how long you need to do it in order to get some of the, what I'll call the magical effects of EWOT. And if you were doing it with a nasal cannula, you'd have to do it for many, many hours each day. We're probably talking 8+ hours. No one's going to do that. That's the great thing about this mask is actually one of the secrets to being able to get the whole process done in 15 minutes.
And just for folks who are listening, just for you're talking 5 liters or so a minute. Usually if we titrate somebody on oxygen, it's a liter a minute. It is a lot less because that 5, I can imagine that blowing up my nose. Just having felt even a liter a minute just in a cannula to me feels like too much. I always got it down when I would play with it in Colorado. So I'm like,
And the nice thing is when you're doing EWOT, it's not really pressure driven oxygen. Your diaphragm's pulling it in. So each breath, you basically control the flow of oxygen.
That's nice. That helps a lot of folks too. There's also like the anxiety of having a mask on too and being able to be in control versus, I think a lot of people also are kind of traumatized from CPAP machines, which is another whole podcast of how I feel about those. But it's just blasting people with air and I can imagine.
Nope, that's not really happening here. CPAP too, you're trying to sleep and you're trying to go into a peaceful state and you're getting, you feel like you're underneath a tornado of oxygen. That's kind of a little bit of a different scenario. But no, we don't really have a lot of issues with that. The mask is clear as well, which I think helps people like anxiety. You can still see your face. It's not like hidden from you. And usually, the first time, sometimes people just getting adjusted in the feel of it. So, okay, I got to put this thing on. But usually by the second or third session, I don't hear anybody you adjust to it really quick.
Makes sense. So you said you've got some more red light coming out. Beyond that, what's next for you guys? What are you thinking about, Brad?
Well, I'll just say on my journey, I learned a lot about different health and wellness technologies. And my hope is to continue to bring more of those forward and make them affordable to people in the chronic health space. And do what I really try to do, which is make sure that we bring science and transparency to all the places we play. We're one of the few that does customer reviews on our site, that puts, a lot of science on the site, and just try to talk to people about it. It's when people have the information, they can make an informed decision. And I think that's so important, because I know when I was early on in this, there just wasn't any information except for what a manufacturer wanted you to hear. And, you have to think about, is that legit or not? And so I always want to try to bring the science and transparency to it.
It's so important. It's so important. I've had multiple people, that are in my one clinic or the other, whether it's my Washington or my Wisconsin, say to me, you bring a lot of cool stuff on, and I feel like I need all of it. And I don't know, I'm desperate to feel better. I feel like I need all these things. And, of course, in my place, I feel kind of guilty, but at the same time, I'm like, well, my mission is to present, the opportunities, but also love when someone is coming on, gets it, but also you're presenting the information in a way that someone can make their own personal choice.
That's right. And not try to dazzle them with fancy words, but bring it to them in a level that they can absorb it. Because I just feel like in this day and age, we all need to take control of our own health and wellness. And that starts with having the right information to make the right decisions.
100%. That's why I like to do this podcast. So for folks that are like, Brad, I'm super interested here, can they get in touch with you? I mean, I'm sure you've got some folks that they could talk to, if not you. How does it work? Let's talk about your website. Let's talk about all those details so folks can reach you. And if you guys are on social media, let us know too.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they just want to learn more and they don't, about red light or EWAT, we have a YouTube channel, and the handle is 1000 Roads HQ, all spelled out, ONETHOUSAND ROADS HQ. And you can find us there. We post videos every week, and it's a great information resource. We bring science, we bring stories of how people are doing better and results they're seeing and all that sort of stuff. If you're a little bit deeper in and you want to contact us with specific questions, go to our website, oneroads.com, and on the contact page, reach out, and we review every single one of those. We get back to folks, or you can even give us a phone call. So a real person will answer the phone and answer your questions, and could be me, could be somebody else, but we're always there for our customers to give them the information they need and answer all their questions.
Excellent. Well, I like it when you've got someone live answering the calls. That always makes it a big difference. Brad, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights, your story, and some really cool stuff about EWAT that I didn't even know. I learned a couple things today, so this is huge. I love it when I learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Hey, Health Junkies. Want to let you know what I'm drinking while I'm on the podcast. Today, it is from Perfect Hydration, the perfect morning drink. It helps me to eliminate needing to do apple cider vinegar, a little lemon water, take my turmeric, take my electrolytes, and my B vitamins. Because now it's all in one drink. So if you're looking for something that can help you simplify your morning routine, this is it. And if you're old enough to remember the drink called Tang, that's what it tastes like. And much healthier, of course, in this case. So if you're interested in trying it out, you can head over to Perfect, PRFCT. There we go. Perfect.com. Hey, fellow health junkie. Thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.